Take one. Mark.
My name is Tom Mahota. I am a ceramic artist, engineer, and product designer. I'm from Minnesota and I'm an SJA Fellow. My goal for myself is to make things that are meaningful to me and also meaningful to other people. I feel at home in design and industrial design and product design like I never have in anything else, and so I'm just excited about spending the rest of my life doing it. This masterpiece is the first piece of pottery that I ever made. The thing that I think my entire life has motivated me is just a love of making things, of creating things. Hi everyone. For the last 10 years, I have been completely obsessed with making pottery, which I think is actually a little unusual because I never went to school for pottery or ceramics or art. I studied mechanical engineering and product design. But for some reason, ever since I first sat down at a pottery wheel, and I still remember it, it's just made sense. But I did eat a lot of dirt as a kid, so my theory is that, some clay must have just become a part of me. And it's that part, coming together with the technical part of me, that has led to this question that I've been interested in, which is, how can the technology that exists today, things like software, robotics, AI, how can those things be used to explore traditional handcrafts like pottery in new ways? So in the last year, I've made a lot of traditional ceramic things in all kinds of non-traditional ways, and it's changed my perspective on what I think makes handmade work meaningful. So what I'd like to do is share a bit of a process from one of those pieces that I made, a teapot, and some of the things that I learned along the way. To set the scene, let me introduce you to my studio. This is in St. Paul, Minnesota, and one of the non-traditional things about this space are these guys. These are 3D printers, and thanks to the fellowship, I was able to design and build a couple of my own that can print clay. Now, I went through a few versions of these. This is the most current one, and they're actually kind of funny machines because the way they work is they allow you to create these incredible forms that have never been possible before, but what they're really doing is making fancy coil pots. I don't know if anyone here has taken like a beginner pottery class, but the first thing you make is a coil pot because they're so simple. Turns out 3D printing them is not. Even if the clay is the tiniest bit too soft, your object will just collapse under its own weight. That looks like this. If it's too hard, nothing comes out. That looks like this. I've seen this one artist who describes the perfect printing consistency as feeling like a fresh cow pie. I thought that was pretty funny, and if you're wondering what that looks like, no, I'm just kidding. This is what it looks like when it does work. Once I did have this thing working, I was pumped. And then immediately after that, I ran into another problem. Every piece of pottery that I'd ever made up until this point, I'd done by hand. And now, all of a sudden, I had this machine that was doing it for me. I had replaced myself. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. But then I got to meet Johnny Ive, and here's where my perspective started to change. Johnny shared a story with us about how special the first time he saw the Macintosh was, and how he felt a connection to the people who had made the computer because he could sense the care that they had put into it. And I really appreciated that because in that moment, I realized that I felt the same way about meaningful handmade stuff. It's not that handmade things are inherently special or inherently meaningful just because somebody touched it with their hands. I think they can become that way when they offer a personal connection to whoever cared enough to put in the effort it takes to make something really great with your hands. So for me, using something like the printer would only ever detract from the work if I were to use it as a way to cut corners. And since I didn't plan on doing that, I just had to focus on creating the best possible output by embracing all the things that the printer could do that I couldn't, and vice versa too. So what I decided to do for my teapot was split it into pieces, some that I could print, some that I could make by hand. The bigger forms of the teapot, things like the walls and the spout, I knew those would be good candidates for the printer. So I designed a couple digital versions in VR and then sent those to be printed out. Here's a picture of the body. After that, I rolled out some slabs of clay by hand and attached everything together. And then next was the lid, and I had been planning to throw that on the wheel. That's what would be typical for a piece like this. But I had also printed out an extra spout, and I found that if I let it dry out just the right amount, I could alter the digital form that came off the printer with my hands and get something totally unique. And I just thought this was so cool that I had to include it. After that, the last step was to add a handle, and then for the glaze, I decided to use color to highlight the two ways of making, printing and hand building, coming together. Here's some pictures of the result. Now, I think this is a pretty cool piece, but I also just think it's an interesting response to that original question, that tech and pottery question. When I look at this, I see a connection to me and the things that I learned while making it. I see a connection to the technology of today and what made this thing possible. And I see a connection to the hundreds of years of teapots that came before this. And don't worry, I know nobody else sees those things. But what I hope you do see is the care that went into it, because that's why I'm proud of it. And that's what I think communicates that this can be a meaningful thing. A year ago, at our first fellow retreat, we each got the chance to make posters of our own version of Steve's line, "Make something wonderful." And I wrote that I wanted to make something meaningful. At the time, I'll be honest, I just thought that was going to look good on a poster. Fast forward to today, though, that's changed. This fellowship has been an unbelievable privilege, and thanks to all the incredible people that we've had a chance to meet, I've learned that meaningful things find ways to connect people through the care that's put into them. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make things that do that. Thank you.